1 Samuel chapter 11 begins like this. And then Nahash, the Ammonite, came up and encamped against Jabesh Gilead. And all the men of Jabesh said to Nahash, "Make a covenant with us, and we will serve you." And Nahash the Ammonite answered them, "On this condition I will make a covenant with you, that I may put out all your right eyes and bring reproach on all Israel." Doesn't sound like a good deal, does it? And then the elders of Jabesh said to him, "Hold off for 7 days, that we may send messengers to all the territory of Israel. And then, if there's no one to save us, we'll come out to you." And so the messengers, they came to Gibeah of Saul, and they told the news in the hearing of the people, and all the people lifted up their voices and wept. Now there was Saul coming behind the herd from the field, and Saul said, "What troubles the people that they weep?" And they told him the words of the men of Jabesh. And then the Spirit of God came upon Saul, and he heard this news, and his anger was greatly aroused. So he took a yoke of oxen, and he cut them in pieces, and sent them throughout all the territory of Israel by the hands of messengers, saying, "Whoever does not go out with Saul and Samuel to battle, so it will be done to his oxen." And the fear of the Lord fell on the people. And they came out with one consent. And when they numbered them in Bezek, the children of Israel were 300,000, and the men of Judah were 30,000. So nearly 1,300,000 soldiers came out. And they said to the messengers who came, "Thus you will say to the men of Jabesh Gilead, tomorrow by the time the sun is hot, you will have help." And in Israel, that's very early, 7 in the morning. And then the messengers came and reported it to the men of Jabesh, and they were glad. That's an understatement, isn't it? Verse 10 continues, "Therefore the men of Jabesh said, tomorrow we will come out to you," to Nahash, "that you may do with us whatever seems good to you." And so it was that Saul put the people in 3 companies, and they came into the midst of the camp in the morning watch, and they killed Ammonites until the heat of the day. And it happened that those who survived were scattered, so that no 2 of them were left together. This was an astounding, overwhelming victory. Verse 12. Then the people said to Samuel, "Who is he who said, 'Shall Saul reign over us?' Bring the men that we may put them to death." But Saul said, "Not a man shall be put to death today, for today the Lord has accomplished salvation in Israel." And then Samuel said to the people, "Come, let's go to Gilgal and renew the kingdom there." So all the people went to Gilgal, and there they made Saul king before the Lord in Gilgal. And there they made sacrifices of peace offerings before the Lord. And there Saul and all the men of Israel rejoiced greatly. The New Testament tells us that the things that were written in the Old Testament were written for our learning. And when we dig through the scriptures, sometimes we uncover treasures. And sometimes the Lord leaves those treasures near the surface. And this is one of those chapters. I love it when God puts the cookies on the lower shelf for his children, because the names here indicate to us a real spiritual lesson. The city of Jabesh Gilead was on the eastern side of the Jordan River. Perhaps you have a map in your Bible, and you'll find they're about a third of the way down from Galilee to the Dead Sea, on the eastern side of the Jordan River. Jabesh Gilead was in the mountains of Gilead, and it was situated in the property or the area of the tribe of Manasseh. Manasseh was one of those tribes that wanted to settle outside of the promised land. If you remember, in Deuteronomy and in Numbers, when Moses was leading the children of Israel, a few of the tribes, being herdsmen, they saw that the grazing area on the eastern side of the Jordan River, outside the land that God had promised, they settled there, and they told Moses, "We don't want to enter in, we just want to stay out here." And Moses was upset with them because they were settling outside of God's promises. They were going to be separated by that natural border of the Jordan River. But they came to an arrangement. They said, "If you come with us into the land and help us fight the battle, and then you return, that'll be fine." Unfortunately, there's a lesson there for settling outside of God's promises, because this area would be the first area to be attacked by the enemies. And ultimately, it would be the first tribes that were taken away captive when God allowed his judgment. There's a lesson there for us, that when we settle for less than what God has for us, we're vulnerable to the enemy. And so Jabesh Gilead has a history that's very interesting. The word Jabesh itself means dry. Here's a people that are dry, and they're settled outside of God's jurisdiction. And they're approached and attacked by a man named Nahash. And this is where the story becomes simple for us to understand. For the word Nahash, the name itself means serpent, a snake. And so it seems that these dry believers living in an area of compromise, having not fully entered into the promised land, are attacked by the serpent who ultimately wants to take their vision. What a horrible offer this was from Nahash. They asked for a peace treaty, not seeing any opportunity to defend themselves. They felt distant from the other tribes, and so they wanted to settle with Nahash. They wanted to make peace with the snake. And he says, here are your options: die or have your right eye gouged out. What would this do? Well, this would disable them from warfare, largely because this is the aiming eye. And in a spiritual sense, the enemy comes and attacks God's people who are in a vulnerable place in order to put out their vision, to remove their aim, and to make them slaves and captives. Proverbs 29 verse 18 says that without a vision, the people perish. And what a picture for us of that serpent of old, the devil, who comes to remove your vision, to remove your focus and your aim. This is what the devil desires to do in the lives of God's people: to enslave, to weaken, to shame, and to remove their aim and their purpose. Now, it's interesting when we read this because there is a history to Jabesh Gilead and the city where Saul is living, Gibeah. If you remember that story from the end of the book of Judges, it's quite a grotesque and distressing history of Israel. I've often said that the Bible is rated R. It's radical. And if you look back a number of years in Israel's history, there is a connection between the town of Gibeah and Jabesh Gilead. I'll try to summarize the story for you. There was a situation that happened during the period of the Judges, some years before, where a man had a concubine. He was a Levite, and she left him. They got in an argument, and she fled to another city where her family lived, and he went to sweet talk her and bring her back. And in doing so, he had to pass through the tribal area of Benjamin. And it was getting late at night, and they needed a place to stay, and so he stopped in Gilead here. And when he came to Gibeah, I said Gilead, forgive me, Gibeah, when he came to Gibeah, a man came to him in the city square and said, you can't stay outside here tonight, you can't camp out here because these men of Benjamin are very wicked. And so the man and his servant and his girlfriend, his concubine, they went in and stayed with this man, but soon after their doors were closed, a knock came at the door. And there were men outside that wanted to rape that man. They wanted to humiliate him.